You're listening to Conversations with ClubRight, the podcast where we delve into what it's like owning a business in the fitness industry and offer practical insight to help you grow and thrive. I'm your host, Wayne Heath. Let's get into this episode. Great. Well, welcome back, listeners, to a bonus episode of Conversations with ClubRight. Though leading into the new year, 2025, we've got lots of different ideas to think about, lots of different things we'd like to plan. And we did an episode very much like this last year. So we thought we'd bring it all back again for 25 and see ahead with Ryan from Black Raccoon where we believe things could happen and what could happen in 2025. So over to you, Ryan. Introduce yourself if people don't already know who you are.
Yeah, well, hopefully most of your listeners will. I'll probably work with most of them, but yeah, I'm Ryan Charlesworth. I own Black Raccoon Consulting. Have done for sort of 10 years, and I work with independent clubs, franchise, hotel clubs to help them improve their businesses. So yeah, got quite a decent insight into what is happening, what seems to work, what hasn't seemed to work over the last sort of 12 months. So yeah, awesome to be back on.
Thank you very much, and thanks for taking some time out to do it as well, because it's all about looking at what we can do. So before we kick into this, there is a disclaimer to all of this, because these are predicted trends. Although we have been writing a few things during 2024, we'll take a bit of a kudos for that one, I think, Ryan. But in reality, it's ideas, it's a potential strategy. You need to build your own strategy. You've got your own businesses, your own decisions to make. We are going to come up with ideas. And if you like the ideas and they're going to be beneficial and you think you can implement them to the benefit of your business, we'd love that to be part of what you get as the outcome of this particular podcast. So I guess it's kind of leading into some of the questions, really. And there's an awful lot going on right now, right? With AI, it's the biggest thing that everyone's talking about, data-driven. So let's be honest, it is quite a buzzword. I've seen some pretty awful implementations of it and some pretty good ones. But essentially, it means that you want to be more active and analysing what customers are doing, using technology in various different forms, to get a better handling of how you can make the business, dare I say it, more personal, so that member feels, as I've always liked to with our members in our clubs back in the day, was to make sure that they feel loved, because I think if someone feels loved, they like to hang around for a bit longer. So I guess really, how do you see data-driven from a personalisation point of view, Ryan?
I think in terms of data, so I mean AI and everything, that's a massive subject in itself. And I guess AI.
I just threw that one in.
Yeah, just to caveat that before we start. I mean, I think it's worth something us covering a little bit later. But
yeah,
AI covers everything. I mean, it's going to be so integrated into everything we do, from life to business to and I think personally, I love it. I think the potential with it is fantastic. But I think what we all need to understand is, and I say to the clubs all the time, is we are in the hospitality industry. We're not in the tech industry. We're not. Tech supports what we do to help deliver our members' success.
That's a really good point, actually. Really good point.
And there's so many. So people look out there and they're looking for solutions and everything, but ultimately we forget sometimes what we're all about. So when people build a club, it's all about the best kit, the best lighting, the best. And yes, that's important because you want your club to stand above the rest and so on. But fundamentally, everything comes down to the member journey, the client journey, the interaction you have with the members. Members won't stay because you've got an amazing piece of kit. They won't stay because you've got a lovely pool or anything else. They stay because of the interactions between the staff and your and your member. And ultimately, that's what works. Now, the great thing about data, and I've seen some amazing programs. Obviously, you guys do some great stuff with ClubRight, and I've seen some amazing work that's been done over the sort of last 12, 18 months with data. Just being able to look and go, okay, attendance levels, and whereas before it was quite hard to get an understanding of attendance, what classes they were attending, and then how to then respond.
Yes.
So if you know someone's just a class member, and your system allows you to track that and give you the evidence, you can then gear your responses and your communications towards that type of member. If they're just a
Yeah.
gym member, you can do the same thing, PT, and you can give them more of a bespoke. That's the great thing about AI.
Yeah.
The more data you have about that individual client, rather than, I think traditionally we've looked at groups of clients.
Yes.
And so when we look at retention, we look at groups of clients and whether they be class, whether they be age group, sex, or whatever.
Of course.
What we're able to do now, because the data that we're able to generate is so unique, we
Yep.
can actually go down to individuals.
Yeah.
And that response then, and there's some amazing, clever programs out there that allow us then the response to be individual as well.
Of course.
And I just think that's brilliant. I mean, going forward, if you're not using data in that way,
Yep.
and you're not really reviewing the data, and I appreciate sometimes that comes down to time.
Yeah.
That's why the right programs and the right AI structures allows you really just to put on a dashboard. Here's the people you need to contact. It's like yours. Yours will tell you if the people aren't attending, how
Absolutely.
long. Who's
Or
at
one of
risk.
my favourite ones is that someone's doing a certain class, for example, because they like that class. There's a probability they might like another different class. So then you're serving up another opportunity to engage with the club because you're already doing a similar class or something different that could then be of interest to you. So you've got an instant upsell just by looking at the data of what that person's previously done as to what they might want to do next.
Absolutely. And that's all about the client journey.
Yeah.
I tell all my clubs, you've really got 90 days to introduce your members to as much of the club as possible before they find their routine.
Yeah.
And then that is what they do. It's so much harder after those first 90 days to get people to take up PT, to get them to try a Pilates class. I always use the example of getting someone in who's a heavyweight trainer. They you know what I mean? They're into their strength training and everything. Now, all those guys would benefit hugely from Pilates, from yoga. But trying to get those guys in there is quite difficult. Of course it is. But if you can do that within the first 90 days, you now set a new pattern, and that becomes their journey. And suddenly now you've changed. I know people that have changed their whole style of training. They've taken up a different sport because they've been introduced to something different.
Exactly.
You
They're
look
more
at how-
receptive in that first 90 days, right?
Absolutely. You look how many people take up kickboxing or jiu-jitsu. I mean, obviously, you know, my brother owns a martial arts club.
Yeah.
But the amount of people that will come in for the gym, try one class, and then suddenly it's flipped on its head, and the gym becomes the odd Sunday, and they're in the kickboxing, the BJJ, they're in the boxing club. They're doing all of that because they've loved it so much. Now, if you hadn't have introduced them and made an effort to introduce them into that part of the business, they'd still be in the gym.
And it's like that fight you say, it's the first 90 days of being impressionable.
And that's absolutely, but that's where data comes in, because you can then start going, okay, we can now use this information as to what they do to introduce them. Like you say, if they're doing one class, introduce them to another. If they're doing this type of activity, introduce them to something else. And that's the way to make more money. It also allows you to see who's buying what. To allow you to increase your average yield.
And I think you've just read my mind, because I was about to say exactly the same thing. Because if you've got someone that's suddenly been exposed to classes which they've never done before, for example, we all know that classes are a great retention tool, because there's that people enjoy being part of that sort of comrade, should we say. But at the end of the day, also, you can make more revenue because you might decide to sell them a membership that's more money, that allows them to access unlimited classes, for example, or a limited number of classes. But because they're paying a bit more and they're engaging in it, they'll be more receptive to that upsell instantly.
Oh, I mean, how many clubs do the CrossFit style or the High Rock style and whatever, but it's almost a separate part of the business? Or they'll do your transformation programs, your 6-week transformation programs. Now, if you've got the data and you know how that person trains and you know what they're looking to do, how easy is it then to cross-sell that transformation program into them? And off the back of that, then you've got someone on a 6-week program, 250 or 199 or whatever you charge out for it. That's extra revenue. Then you've got the potential of PT after that, because they've gone in from one and they naturally feed into the personal training.
100%.
Suddenly that person's average membership, they might only be paying 30. And suddenly now averaging 130 because of the everything else they're adding to it. And that means you don't have to flog yourself. New members. Because what you're actually doing is taking the members you've got and driving up their value.
Absolutely.
Making as much money, if not more.
And that's exactly what it is. I sat on a plane years ago. This is like a random real thing that happened. But I sat on a plane going to Germany when I worked for Mercedes many years ago. Let's go back a long, long while. And I sat next door to this guy from GE Capital. And then you're on a business trip, you kind of ask the person sitting next door to you, what do you do for a living? And he said, my job's really simple. I said, what's that? He said, well, it's really, really simple. All I do is make sure that every one of our customers at GE spend an extra £1. And I sat there thinking, well, that's really cool. And he said, yeah, of course, look at the size of our customer base. It's enormous. So £1 makes a huge difference. And I've never forgotten that. It was a long time ago now, but it's one of those things that I've never, ever forgotten, because purely and simply, that is exactly what we're talking about, isn't it? Making sure that you can increase the amount of money from a customer who already loves you to help you spend a bit more with you. And it's stuff like that that becomes really important. And if you're looking at, another point on data, I suppose here is, do we ever think that we could over monitor people, Ryan? Do you think that's possible?
I don't think we monitor enough.
That's interesting. Go on.
No, I don't, because although we've got the systems, we don't use the customer's data enough to help them get the best results. So you'll see all these people with Apple Watches, Garmin, MyZone, all these different things. And that's great for the individual customer. And I've owned probably all of those. But none of that data has ever been passed to the club. The club has never asked me for it. They've never gone, okay, let's write your program based on, and then in 6 weeks, if we do a review, let's look at that data. And I think even those clubs that have your tinnitus, your body scales, tinnitus, in body, and so on, just to put them all out there, they don't use that for enough of their clients. So the clubs that make that as part of their inductions are almost that everybody gets it. And the reason we do that is to make sure we know where you're starting and we know where you're progressing to. Because one of the biggest, there's probably 3 reasons why people leave a club. One is no communication. So people don't talk to them, whether that be members or non-members, or staff. The club's dirty. So standards are poor.
It's amazing, isn't it, when you think how high up the list that one is? But God, don't get me on that.
Well, yeah. When you look at the reality, one easy thing to do: sort your cleanliness out. And then the third one is not getting results. So if a client comes in and doesn't get results, and it's not that hard to actually overcome. But the fact that we don't use the tools that are available to us. And I'm not saying we have to have all access to their iPhones and everything else. But if they're recording it and they're wearing one all the time, why don't we ask them to bring the app up and let's see your results? Let's see what you've been doing.
And if you think about results, if it almost, if you could draw it back to the beginning of that customer journey, Brian, and say, okay, what did anyone bother to ask them what they wanted to achieve in the first 90 days of being with them? And I would lay money, so many people don't do that, because everyone's goals are different. Now, some may want to lose simply some weight post-Christmas. If we're talking about 2025, of course, other people may want to improve their strength. Someone could have a joint condition or something else that needs exercise would clearly benefit from. But by not actually asking, why are you doing this? You've actually got yourself in a position of not really being able to help that person. And I honestly believe you don't stand a hope in hell of keeping them either. Purely and simply because they don't see any relevance to stay because you never bothered asking them.
It's amazing that we are the most technologically advanced human generation, with all the tools we have, with all the apps and access to all the data, and yet very few clubs actually. I mean, there are some great ones out there, but they don't use it as they should. And like you say, most of the clubs don't really do the inductions as they should do. We take no as it's accepted too easy. So when we get a new member join, we go, would you like an induction? We don't sell it. We don't actually. The perception of an induction is all completely wrong. They think they're just going to be showing the kit and go, I've used kit before, but that's not what an induction should be about. It should be all based on their goals. It should be writing them a program to make sure they can achieve their goals, get them back in 4 to 6 weeks to change it so we can keep progressing. We record their performance levels so we can show success.
And we're using the data.
Absolutely. Well, we all know in the first 6 weeks, especially on a weight loss program, for instance, they probably won't actually see in the mirror that much difference. They'll feel better. But imagine if you got them on a body fat scale and showed them they've lost 4%, 5% of their body fat. Now, they may not see that around their waistline if they're big enough, but that's a huge motivational factor.
Absolutely.
Wow, 5%. It just keeps pushing. And I think that's where data comes in, and it's a real shame that a lot of clubs will go, we've got an app. Oh, well done. You've got an app that takes bookings. now that's brilliant for your operation. What does it do for the client?
Yeah,
What
exactly
actually,
right.
what actually does it do for the client?
Yeah.
Nothing. It allows them to book more simply, so it makes the process smoother. But actually, for their training, what does it do? Nothing. What messages are we sending through there? How are we recording what they do? How are we rewarding them if they've been to 5 classes in a week and their goal though they were going to start on 1 a week? Their
And a
goal
lot
was
of
to
it
go,
could
I can
be
only get
as,
once a week. Now it's
yeah,
5.
and it's a bit like you say rewarding people, but it's not. And I had this conversation so many times with so many people, but it's not necessarily a value of that reward. It's just actually being acknowledged, getting kudos that you've come along 3 times every week for the last 6 weeks, which is what you set your goal to be, for example, and you've achieved that. Well done, Ryan. That's the
How
kind of
how
stuff that we should be doing.
how important is it, or how do you think it makes you feel if you walked into the club and someone said, "You're here again, well done"? That's
Yeah, I know.
awesome. I can't believe how many times you're getting in now. When you
Yeah,
first joined, it was this. But most of the clubs won't have that information to then pass on, and that's so. It's not all about data in terms of stats, in terms of how many people did this, how many people did that.
yeah,
It's knowing your customer,
yeah.
and sort of
And
going
how that data's used, isn't it? It's how that data's used in a way that has a positive outcome.
absolutely. And I think with retention, everybody looks at and goes, "Oh, it's just making people happy and whatever." There's a lot more to it, and it does take a lot of thought, a lot of training. And that's why people like Paul Bedford and everything make so much money, because they're because obviously it's a real value opinion.
Exactly. And we are talking about basics at the end of the day as well.
But a lot of it does come down to basics. It's knowing your numbers, it's knowing your members. But obviously, if we're talking purely on knowing the numbers and using them, that's where I'd start to use them.
Yeah,
Obviously, in terms of membership sales and that, once you know your performance levels, you can set your targets effectively. You can work on your training. If you know your close percentage isn't where it needs to be, then you've got work to do, and you can bring people in, or you can do more training with your staff. So knowing your figures. A lot of the clubs I work with, and this will shock you, Wayne, a lot of the clubs I work with don't track their numbers at all. So if you ask them what their budget numbers are, their targets, I don't know. If or how did you do this time last year? I don't know. And it's quite, I can understand, and I'm empathetic with. It's hard running a club, and there's a lot going on. But if people are going to do anything, any change, is to literally get something together so they know exactly every month how their performance was, because you can't improve performance if you don't know where you start.
and it's the cause and effect, isn't it, of it?
Absolutely, and it's that whole thing. If you've got a target, you're more likely to achieve. If you just go into the month wandering, you'll wander to whatever you get.
Absolutely. Be wandering all day long, right?
Exactly. So, and then when you look at AI, if you want to go on to that one quickly, that's that the opportunities are massive. I think we've still got a long way to go, but
We have.
just to give you some examples of the things that are coming to potentially help clubs. I was speaking to someone I work with at Grow Metrics, and they're creating something whereby you can record a short audio. The AI will take that, and then you can basically create then follow-up messages with your own voice that you don't have to record every time. You record once, and the AI basically creates your follow-up message, and then that message goes out as a voicemail to that person.
Yeah, like
you
that.
can do the same with video. You could record a video of saying, great to see you at the club today. Can't wait to get you that sort of thing, and it will all be AI generated. So that the voice, the image of you, it takes a picture of you and recreates you as an avatar, and you cannot tell the difference. Amazing. It's so incredible. So you could have then a whole automation process. That rarely involves a member of staff. Now, I still go back to the point that we're in hospitality, and I still think you need to have that human connection.
I was about to cut in and say 100%.
But imagine the fact that you can now, especially clubs that have limited staff levels, you could have something that's going out that feels really personable. I mean, they can even get it so if you train it well enough, it can answer the question. You can actually phone someone on a live call. They haven't quite got to that level where it's working 100%.
But even if it just gets the way, we're making quite significant use of AI now, but in terms of what it does, if it can just remove the mediocrity of common asked questions, for example, that means that the person, and it's really key, I'm all about enabling people to do more. And as long as it's used in a sensible way, it will do exactly that. It will enable people to do more, and also make sure that you're not in a position of the letting that take over because then you've got that horrible danger of going in complete reverse to something we were discussing at the beginning of when we started talking today that we're trying to avoid. We want that personal contact. We want to make sure that people deal with people, and there's nothing more frustrating than not being able to speak to someone to resolve your issues sometimes if it needs it. But equally, there's a lot of issues and a lot of questions that don't need that personable approach and can be satisfied quickly and amicably with some kind of a automation in terms of an AI. So it's quite an interesting position. So I'm glad we
Well, I
talked
heard
about
an
that.
interesting one.
Go on.
I heard an interesting one today on a call. That one of the big chains, I won't name them,
Yep.
because apparently it's not common knowledge yet.
Go
But
on.
they're about to remove all their PTs from their clubs, and it's all going to be put on. PT's going to be on an app.
Oh dear God, what an epic disaster.
Well, see that's where I think it can be used in the wrong way, because
Totally.
personal training is as much about the personality with the client. I did personal training for a long time. Obviously, you've done it, and it's all about the personality with the client as much as the results. So when you go in there, and you're having a good time. You're not, you know what I mean. It's not just about the training. So I think it's
and it's being comfortable with that person, isn't it? Yeah, it's your health and well-being is as personal as your hairdresser and your dentist. It
Also,
really
you
is.
can't really charge £40 an hour for an app. So
Exactly. It's a massive amount of income just sliding out the window. Wow. Well, I look forward to seeing that being released. When's that going to go live?
No idea. I think it's at some point in 2025. But
wow.
Some of the clubs are already releasing the PTs. So they've already been lost their jobs and been moved to other things. So that's an interesting one to watch out. I'll tell you offline who it is.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That makes sense. I'll look forward to having that clandestine conversation later.
But there are some great stuff that come out, and I love it, and I love to see the industry, because we're such a vibrant industry that we've got a real opportunity. Yeah. I mean, you look at the wellness stuff that's coming out now, and a lot of that can be done with AI and so on. So there are some amazing stuff to come. I just think we've got to be careful how we use it. In the same way, we all use it for social media now. I use it for writing ebooks and all sorts of stuff, and I think it's brilliant for that. But just be careful that you don't have apps interacting with apps and AI interacting with AI.
And then who's learning what?
Well, exactly. And I think that's what's happening a lot in because there's a lot of tools out now that you, especially in, say, LinkedIn, where it will respond to someone else's post for you, and it'll find out what it's all about, and it'll create a response. Challenge with that is it doesn't really feed engagement.
No.
And if they're talking, how are you ever supposed to build relationships?
Yeah. And I think that's where AI comes into its own. It could give you a very good starting point. So I think if like anything, isn't it, in context, it can be very, very useful, and it will continue to be escalating to being continually more useful as time goes on. But making sure we keep it in control, I think, is the absolute key to it, and not losing that personal side. Which kind of brings me into hybrid fitness. Let's have a talk about hybrid fitness, because that's personal workouts with virtual training options. Is interesting what you just said earlier, thinking about the virtual training options. It allows members to access fitness resources on site and remotely. Do people really want that remote bit? Is it a bit like post-COVID? Everyone couldn't wait to get back in the door again. What's your thoughts on that? I mean, you've got the technology part and the hybrid offerings, but in general, that hybrid fitness experience, what's your thoughts?
I'll probably go back to and be a bit left field with this one, because I'm not a massive fan. If I'm
interesting.
Honest.
Yeah,
I'm not a massive fan. I think they can work if you're trying to build up a timetable in your studio, and you don't have the resources or the staff or the ways to do it.
Yeah.
So you'd a bit like you'd probably have 20 classes that are manned, that have got a person, and then you can put on almost unlimited classes around that. So if someone can't turn up at a class, they've got the ability to walk into the studio, put a class on, and deliver it. And for that, I think great. My only problem is where I've seen it introduced, it's never been a massive success. Class numbers drop massively. People want an instructor in front of them. Having taught quite a lot with spin and various other classes and boot camps, it's not the same experience. And it doesn't matter whether you've got an internationally renowned instructor teaching on a screen.
Yeah.
It's not the same class as it was if they taught it live, so you don't get that same interaction. You're watching a video like you would. It's a bit like the old Jane Fonda videos
Yeah,
that people used to buy at
that's a
Christmas.
bad vision.
Yeah, well, depends, I guess. But it's a bit like that, and doing it in your lounge, and I
Yeah,
think that's why Peloton struggled. Peloton and the likes, they thought that the COVID was the new era, that they were going to
yeah.
be the new thing, and I think it was the most ill thought out response to the
But
whole thing.
actually,
What
if
they
you
should have
think
done is
about,
put the money in the bank.
well, there is that. The other side of it is that that's when you've got what I would class as the pre-recorded style of fitness delivery. If someone's doing, and this is one of the biggest things that we created and actually built during because of COVID, to be fair, was the ability for a class to be, even if that class was not actually able to be attended, it felt like it was live. When the gyms opened their doors, those people that still couldn't find time to come into the gym in between work time, family time, or whatever they happened to be doing, still wanted to engage with that live class. And you had a proportion of people turned up to the live class, but another proportion of people enjoyed accessing those classes live on a live class on Zoom. And I think that's, for me, that's the
I
hybrid
think
bit.
that
It's a level
works
of
better.
personability.
Yeah, I think that works better. It's simply because you're almost part of the class. You've just got
Absolutely.
that. You're slightly removed from being within it,
Of course.
but I think it still has options, and I think a number of the clubs I've worked with have carried that on, and they just literally still have the camera in the corner,
Yeah,
and they film it and they send it out. And I think that was a brilliant thing you guys did during the pandemic, and it allowed people to follow that on.
it did.
I think if you look at a lot of the unlike a training course, so if I was to go and do a PT training course, first aid or whatever, I'd happily do it online,
Of course.
sit and do it at my own time or whatever.
Yeah.
Doing exercise and a class, I don't think works in the same way. And for some people it does in the same way. Some people have home gyms and they're quite happy to go in their home gym and train. It's never been my thing. But I think this hybrid where they have apps and you can log on and I've never looked at, say, Les Mills stats to see how many of their monthly programs get used. But whenever I see the hybrid as regards to in club, it's never been a huge success. Some people use it, and I guess it's a nice selling point. You can use class whenever you want. We've got all these virtual classes and everything. So from a sales point at the start, it's quite nice. From actual usage numbers,
Yeah.
it'd be interesting to see what people. I mean,
And I
feel
think
free
the
to
bit that's
feedback to me, sound
interesting,
wrong.
you say like hybrid, but it is genuinely is a hybrid. It's a combination of in person. It could be a combination of a live class zoomed and also pre-recorded content. That's the hybrid you're looking at. There's three things that different people would be able to engage with. And I think if a club for 2025, this is whether I'm right or wrong, it's an opinion, but I think if someone was to actually allow themselves to deliver all three, what have you now done? You've given a choice. Currently, the three most used choices you've made available. What's there not to like about that? I think it's giving people choice is always the most important part, because then you've allowed that person to make an informed decision and you've given the choice of what things they want to consume from your business.
As long as the choice is easy for the club to
Exactly.
maintain, that's the
Yeah.
thing. So anything they set up, if you are going to do a hybrid where people can watch it live and take part at home and so on, as long as the quality is still there, so
Yeah.
that all the instructors know how to work the camera,
Yeah.
all those sorts of things. So you've got all that set up properly. Then what you don't want to do is have amazing classes in your club and then have a
Yeah.
really poor setup. So what's delivered at
Yeah.
home or the visuals, it doesn't quite work.
Exactly.
It doesn't give you it doesn't really match then for what
No.
your brand's all about. So yes, do it, but just make sure that do it properly. So get the right cameras, and it's set up. This is how you do it, and it goes live every time. That's the key with it. It's all about the quality control, isn't it? And
But that becomes the process. And equipment nowadays, it's not expensive, is it? None of it is that.
No, it's not.
Buy just about everything you need really cheaply for a small amount of money on Amazon, and off you go. There was an advert for Amazon. Maybe I shouldn't have done that, but hey ho, that's the easiest place to go, right? But that kind of stuff is easy to do. But then it becomes, like you said, making sure it's good quality. But that all becomes the process that the club has to do. They have to know what to do before they start a live class, so they can actually consider that someone's at home taking that same class, what they're going to see, what they're going to hear. I think that could work really well. Could work really well.
The good thing about filming it is obviously then you've got great content for your social media as well. So you can obviously then
absolutely
cut that down and use it for your social media. So you've got then content, which a lot of clubs struggle to generate regular good content of activity.
And you could make it on-demand content that you can host yourself as well for someone else to consume. So, you talk about buying a pre-recorded something from some other company. You can actually pre-record your own ones and keep them in a place.
Yeah.
Reuse it. It's good content.
Absolutely, and they're not hard to put out there. I mean, you can even just put them out for free on YouTube if you want to, just to add for added SEO and so on. So it's there are options with it. It's just got to be done right. That's the key. And if you can in club, keep it as personal as you can. Obviously, because these systems actually aren't as cheap as you think. You're still going to be paying 500-600 quid a month out minimum for a virtual system in your club, plus obviously all the investment up front with the screens and so on. So sometimes it's actually work out what works best for you. Sometimes you're better off having less proper manned ones than you are investing in virtual in your club, which doesn't.
And like we say, it's all these are purely ideas, things that you might want to fit in with your business. And that's what it's all about. It's coming up with ideas and thinking, well, maybe that could work, maybe it won't work, but let's have a look.
Absolutely.
So holistic wellness, we talked about this at length, I remember, at the turn of the year. So, a trend that very much, I know you are very passionate about this kind of thing. And, rest and recovery so that members can keep turning up, making sure that they're in line to where they want to be, and that wellness integration with the right people, different types of people. Where have you seen that change this year?
Well, I'm quite lucky because obviously one of my best friends is Glenda River-Allen, so that is their field.
Ah, well, there you are. You see.
So
what does Glenda think?
Well, the wellness field is that. I think that's where potentially the future of the whole industry is going to go in terms of fully integrated wellness program. So fitness fits under wellness rather than the other way around.
Yeah, makes sense.
Because I think that's the way it's going. People want more than just fitness, and I think if we're going to drive these 85% that are not members of our club, now that's not 85% of the people that are sat at home doing nothing. They are doing other things. They're playing sport. They're going for walks. They're They're cycling. They're swimming. They're rowing. Whatever it is, they're doing loads of other stuff. They are being active. They're just not members of our club, and that's because we don't offer what they want. We don't offer the nutritional support that they're potentially. Let's be honest. Most people that train could do with nutritional support.
And I'll tell you what, the nutrition bit is a very interesting one because so many people don't know what to do, what to eat, and when. That is, in essence, you could argue that's quite, not say an easy thing to do because it's another skill set. However, if we go back to one of the subjects we talked about earlier, with an element of AI and a bit of sensibility, you could start to introduce some common sense style eating, even if it was as much as that, beyond being a detailed nutritionist, because obviously that's a skill set in itself and is very much a science.
There's some great programs you can get. I work with people like Benfit. And they do a program that you can literally just drop into your club, and it will write diet plans for people. And
Wow.
and that's driven by Dutch nutritionists that have written it and obviously program it out. And it's a brilliant. And it's not just theirs that it's around. That's just the guys I work with. But there's systems like that you can introduce into your club, that you can have a whole program of nutrition and your guys don't need to advise on it. Yeah. They need basic nutrition that they'd have off their PT courses. And then the system will do it all for you then in terms of writing the diet plans, giving them advice, shopping lists, all that sort of stuff so they can eat healthy, which then sits on the back of what you do. But so that's nutrition. I mean, let's talk about the GLP-1 thing before we go as well. We'll talk about it because I think that's going to be a big game changer for us going forward. But with the wellness stuff, you're then looking at sleep, healthy sleep. Most of us don't now. We live in such a stressful world that we don't get enough sleep. Most people are going to sleep at 1 o'clock in the morning, up at 7. We need 8 to 10 hours.
That sounds quite early.
Well, Probably is for me.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Most people need at least 8 hours. There's very few that can survive on 4-6 hours a day. So sleep is a massive problem.
Mm,
Stress is a massive problem, but they don't know their body's in stress all the
of
time.
course.
So there's a lot into wellness, and I know there's a lot being pushed for the industry to start working with the NHS. I know obviously UK Active and
Yeah.
those guys are all looking at that. That's largely being pushed through the leisure centres, so the likes of the Andy King and John Oxley and the guys up at KA Leisure and so on. But I think it will start filtering out into the mainstream. Once it starts getting some traction, it'll start feeding out to the mainstream, and then in the independent clubs and the big commercial clubs will be able to get involved in that because they'll see a commercial reason to do it. I think that's half the challenge.
I think
At
it
the
is.
minute, people don't see commercial value to it. So to train your staff, get people in. I mean, it might be worth at some point getting Glenda on.
Yeah, no, I
the
think it would
podcast to
be
have a
very
chat
much so.
because they're doing some great work with your PT and launching wellness coaches into clubs.
Okay.
Which they're effectively, like you would have your PT come in, they literally have a wellness coach there that will go through all those other elements: sleep, diet, what
And
else
you know
have we
what?
got?
That's a really interesting point, isn't it? You've mentioned because we talked earlier on about an induction, but the traditional induction, supported by a PAR-Q inverted commas, right? It's not. It's maybe just not as relevant, is it? It just doesn't bring in all the elements of why that particular individual turned up at that gym to join. Now, was it actually their poor sleep patterns? We know that regular exercise will improve that, but did we actually understand the symptoms that that person was looking to try and solve, and what those things were that were causing them either discomfort or just generally feeling a bit meh? You know what I mean? It's kind of what really drives people.
Absolutely. I mean, I've got a guy coming on my podcast in a couple of weeks, Nick Dobson, I think his name is, and he trains. He's a personal trainer, but he trains people around with the biohacking stuff. He hates the word
Nice.
biohacking,
It
but
does sound a
that's
bit
all
wrong, doesn't it?
about
But anyway,
yeah, it does. But it's all about looking at your lifestyle. So
yeah,
how can you train maximally in the gym if you've had 2 hours sleep? How can you? If you're really stressed, your body's not going to respond in the same way to what you're doing with it. If you're feeding your body the wrong stuff, it's not going to respond. If your adrenaline is permanently up, like it's well known, I have chronic fatigue. Now, with mine, I have to train in a completely different way. And some days I won't be able to. So if I'm not asked those questions and someone tries to write me a program,
yeah,
a lot of the changes I need to make, yes, exercise is one, but lifestyle changes are two. So
course.
I've had to make loads of changes in my lifestyle, not just getting more exercise. So if I want to lose weight, go and exercise. Well, no, that's
It's not
not
just one
actually
thing, is
the
it?
no. That exercise, to be fair, probably does more for my mental health than
Yeah,
it does my physical, to
yeah,
be honest, because it makes me tired. It wears me out. You know what I mean? So the exercise is more of a mental thing for me.
yeah.
It's not physical, but the physical, the losing weight stuff comes through diet, reducing my stress, sleeping better, um, things like the grounding that helps reset my body and reduce inflammation, all those sort of things. So think about the stuff that I'm putting in my body that will help the chronic fatigue, give me more energy, and then it helps going forward. So I think you're right. I don't think the induction, but the challenge we've got, and this is what Glenda will say, we don't have enough people qualified in those other elements. And so whilst we've just got people trained as a PT, we're always just going to focus on that fitness and the body element. And I think that's why they're trying to get being coaches out into the clubs so that they're able to take it as a wider field so that we can actually start making a difference, not just on the
Yeah.
physical. There's a lot more involved in it.
And if you think about, I suppose, you've got a number of people that will be listening to this podcast today thinking, I'm not skilled up, I haven't got the talent or the required knowledge to deal with that. What kind of or maybe even the investment financially, what kind of low cost ways could a gym start to embark on that wellness journey? What kind of things do you think someone could implement potentially tomorrow that could make a step in that direction?
It's probably a difficult one for me to answer that way because not
so we need to
being
get
a
Glenda
wellness
back.
expert on that.
So
But what I would say is, if someone's on about going down that route and doing it properly,
yeah,
I would speak to someone like Glenda
yeah,
or her counterparts. Obviously, Glenda's my best mate, but
hmm
it's to speak and get them to advise because and there are. I mean, they do plenty of courses in terms of how to be a
of
wellness
course.
coach and the things to implement and everything else, but do it properly because it's a bit like we've said for years that personal trainers shouldn't write meal plans for people because they're
No,
not trained,
exactly.
they're not dietitians, and
No,
I believe that. I think PTs can give nutrition advice. Of course, they can.
yeah,
They read enough on it. They live by that. But I don't think they're qualified to write a diet plan for
no,
someone
I agree.
unless they are a dietitian. And it's the same way in a lot of these wellness stuff. If you haven't been trained in how to deal with sleep deprivation or stress or whatever, then don't try and advise on it. Have a look and see whether there's either tools out there that
Yeah,
can support that, whether there's companies out there that can help and support. And they definitely are, and they are growing. There's loads of those companies that bizarrely work with corporates at the minute, but not
yeah,
really in our field. So it may be a great crossover for them to start going, actually, we can bring our programs now into the fitness because there's
yeah.
a growing need for it. So I wouldn't necessarily say to a club, try and do it yourself unless you have got people qualified.
Of course.
But there are options out there, and if they want to, they can drop me a message and I'll find
That'd be
some
great.
people for them.
I think people really appreciate advice. And I think what we've kind of identified here in this particular section of our chat today is that it's the whole person. We're not just talking
Absolutely.
about bits of that individual, it's the whole individual and how that particular gym or fitness in play leisure centre, whatever they happen to do, how can they help the whole person and maybe draft in, as we said, the right knowledge to help them.
And I tell you what, that comes on to a slightly different but similar point is
Oh, cool.
there seems to be a growth in people who want like a professional coach. You know how a professional sportsman will have a specialist high-end level coach, high-end coach. That is now starting to filter into fitness. So I know we've got some great trainers and stuff like that, but it's always almost been on a basic level. We need to just solve it. Now what we're doing, you're seeing a lot of the practices that are coming down from the top sports, the rugby, the football, the cricket, or athletics, rowing.
Yeah.
They're all now starting to filter in and becoming normal practices. And that then filters back to data because obviously a lot of that stuff. I mean, you look at the British cycling team, that's all data.
Yeah,
Their
100%.
marginal gains thing that David Brailsford did was all data. It was data driven. We need 1% here, 1% there, 1%. But it was all about data. How can we make the bikes 1% better? How can we make our nutrition 1% better? But it was all based on data. So when it comes back to data, that's really important. But you'll see a lot of the practices now, even things down to recovery.
Yeah,
recovery was never a thing in gyms. Now that's come from whether it be the ice baths or whether it be the vibrating guns.
It's a lot of it around
come
now.
from professional sports.
Of course it has.
So it's really interesting to see how a lot of those now are filtering down into the general standard population. But also, I think what's driving a lot of this, Wayne, and even down to the wellness side, is people's understanding of it better. So they didn't really understand fitness. They'd come into a gym and be advised, and that's what they did. Now there's so much data out there for people to understand what's good for you, what's bad for you, and whatever, that they come in almost partly educated anyway, if not fully educated.
I think just more aware, aren't we? We're just more aware of everything around us.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think a lot of that was down to COVID. I think COVID drove the need to be healthy. And then it also drove the need for people to go, actually, it's not just about being fit, it's about being well. And it's also, if you listen, I can't think of his name off the top of my head, some of the guys will talk about being healthy in later life, but not necessarily living longer. That's no longer the buzz phrase.
Right.
It's living healthier for longer.
That's
so
interesting.
We don't want to be 100 in our wheelchair. No one wants to be in 100 in our wheelchair.
100%,
and looking at the assisting dying, which is obviously going through that sort of thing. No one needs that.
No.
What we want to be 90 and still going up the mountain.
And still being able to do stuff. Exactly right.
That's what we want. And I think that has been far more prevalent now than it ever was before. How can we make sure that what we do means we're more mentally aware as we go forward? So that's
a really good point, though, because I think about my dad. I mean, crikey, he passed when he was 90, but only 2 years before that, at the age of 88, he was still playing tennis 3 times a week. And this was the scary bit. He was actually riding a motorbike. God help everyone else on the roads in Essex. But anyway, the reality, he'd always been active. And because of that, he was able to do things for a lot longer into his life. And then, obviously became ill, and sadly we lost him. But the reality is that he'd had a very full, healthy life, is exactly what you've just described there. And that was a great example of that.
It's really important. But here's an interesting one that I read the other day. Ollie Patrick, I think, put it out there. And it basically said that if your VO2 max in old age is pretty much based on how well you or how healthy you are in your 40s, 50s, or 60s, because your VO2 max, and I might get the stats wrong here, but it sure drops by 10% every decade.
Yeah.
So if you had a poor VO2 max in your 40s, you're in a wheelchair in your 70s. That's the reality. And you're not changing that. You're not. Obviously, we can impact that and get stronger and whatever, but your VO2 max will drop. That's why you don't see 70-year-olds playing football for England, because the body can't cope with it at that age. It's the reality of life.
Exactly.
But if you're not physically active at the 40s, 50s, that sort of, you're in trouble.
Yeah, you won't be able to get that back.
You will be an old person.
Yeah.
Whereas if you can keep active all the way, and I think that's the thing that people are understanding now, to sort of go, now I'm understanding. And I think it's brilliant that people are more educated.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing for our industry. We can now show off our skills, whereas before we were having to deliver basic knowledge, basic how. Now people understand it. You can go deeper. You can really
100%.
push their understanding and get them training harder, better, more efficient. I think it's great for our industry.
And that kind of leads us nicely into the community piece. We talk at length about this with loyalty, referrals, all these wonderful things about people enjoying things that they want to tell their friends about. But community is always one of the most, I would have actually said at certain points when we had our gym's business time, I think that's almost more important than fitness actually sometimes. The fact that certain people came in there they might live on their own, they might be quite lonely, they've lost their partner. The actual fact that person was able to come in every day of the week if they wanted to be around other people rather than sit there being lonely at home. That whole community side, I think we quite often underestimate how important that is. You
see a really successful club, and I promise you their community is strong.
100%.
You look at any of the clubs that do community really well, they are absolutely buzzing. Not only from a retention point of view, but if you look at their social media, look at the engagement, it's amazing. I mean, you take the example of the club that's in my village, the Coverdale Forge. Brilliant club. They've only been open five years, I think, now. But it just oozes community. Absolutely oozes it. Yeah. And I think I wrote a post a few months back about the reasons why independent clubs have a massive opportunity. Because I think an independent club, because it's privately owned, because the owner is closer to the business,
of course,
they can smash it out the park as regards to community.
Definitely.
They usually live in the community. They usually most of them are kids in their local schools.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? You've got that connection to everybody that's coming in.
So it's actually not difficult if you bothered.
No, absolutely not. And I think those that fail to, some of them purposefully want to keep themselves away from the business, and I get that, and they run it as a business. But I think the opportunity of an independent club over any of the commercial clubs, over any of the leisure centres, anybody else, is huge, because they can generate that local trust, that local connection, far better than anybody else. It's really hard I've worked for commercial clubs, and it's really hard when you've got 8,000 members to create a community. You can in various classes, and you have small little groups and niches and so on, but it's hard to create a whole club community. Whereas a small club, 500 members, even up to 2,000 members, you can really generate a great vibe, and it drives everything. It drives sales, it drives long-term value, it drives retention, it drives engagement, it drives anything you want to do, even staff. If you've got a really highly engaged membership base, the chances of your staff leaving, or when they do leave, it has to be a really good opportunity.
Yeah.
So your staff turnover tends to be lower because everybody's engaged in the excitement of the club. And it comes from everybody. I think some people think you can just say, I want community, and it happens. It doesn't. It
No,
comes from the
absolutely
top.
not
The
at all.
top have to feed it down.
Yeah.
All the staff need to engage, and then you have to spend time and effort. And it's not about creating a social night, going bowling, going to the pub. That's part of
Oh,
it,
I was in for
obviously, if
that.
that's what you want to. Yeah, exactly. That's part of it. But it's also how you engage with them on the gym floor. Do we
Yeah.
interact with everybody in the club? Do the staff naturally warm to people when they come in?
Yeah.
I've seen clubs where it's head down,
Don't even
and
say
people
hello.
wave them off as they sign in. It shouldn't be. It should be, hi, how you doing? How was your meal last night? You know what I mean? That is how you breed a community, and then you're able to do the things where they go on holiday together and they do all those different.
But it's interesting when you mention LTV or long time value. That all spins off all of these things.
Of course it does.
Because the long-term value of your customer is far, far easier and in your control than it ever is trying to find a new customer. So if you're constantly filling that funnel and chucking more opportunities in there and hoping they're going to join, that's fine. You do need to do that, and you should do that. However, your quickest win is looking after existing people. And like we said earlier, some of the things that you could do by improving the selection of products that someone could spend with you will increase the LTV and long-term value of that customer's spend. I mean, it's actually critical, and the community space will do it.
Absolutely. And if you've got really high engagement, so you've got a great community there, everybody loves, if they do have a complaint, they're more likely to accept the response. I don't know, you put your prices up. That's always the one everyone's scared of.
Yeah, absolutely.
You put your prices up. If members love what you do and they value it, they're not going to leave. They might come to you and say, oh, what's going on with the price? You know what I mean? You may have those conversations, but they're not leaving because of it.
No.
If you don't have that and someone has a complaint, they're leaving. They'll use that as the excuse to go, and they'll go. They won't give you the opportunity to solve it.
Yeah.
They'll put a dodgy review on Google. Yeah. Because you're not a person to them.
No.
You're just a business.
Right.
You're a club. You're no different than Tesco's is to them, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, it becomes faceless, doesn't it?
You do become faceless, and that's the challenge with some of the clubs in our industry, which the ones I don't like, because I think you have to have that interaction, whether you're a big club, small club, whatever.
Yeah.
To be successful and to keep driving forward and everything, and not have massive churn, you want those members to actually feel guilty about complaining about something, even if they've got a right to.
Well, exactly. Exactly right.
Sorry to tell you, Wayne, but and that's how they do it. Instead of coming up and going, it isn't right. It's more of a, did you know?
Yeah, just let you know, mate. This causing a bit of a problem. I just want you to let you know, because it's important. I enjoy coming in. Now, I don't want that other person to ruin the club or whatever it might be.
It just feeds the whole atmosphere.
It really does.
Create a great community. But it all comes down to communication, and that's whether it's calls to members, speaking to them on the gym floor, even down to your automations. Because I always tell people, don't bother sending an offer, whether it be a PT offer, referral offer. Don't bother sending an offer unless you've got regular communications with you. Because 9 times out of 10, what you do is you go into a club, someone joins. The first email they get is PT offer 10-pack for 300 quid. You've not once asked them how they are. You've not asked them back in for an induction. You've not phoned them.
You haven't earned the right.
You haven't earned the right, and it just amazes me. So don't send offers out to clients unless you've actually engaged with them previously with other activity.
And that goes back to retention in general. I know it's always going to be the most important thing, but that will affect your long-term value. But if you've engaged with that person from day one, even if it's just a few days after, saying how you're getting on after your first few days, then a few weeks down the road, and it all becomes a very structured understanding of why people care. I think the word care is quite important. They actually do care about you as an individual and where you're going and what you're going to do. And let's be fair, the ultimate goal is for that person to help them spend more money with you. They actually know that as well. They're not scared of the fact that they know they're going to pay more money, and they will pay more money if they feel wanted, ultimately.
Absolutely. Definitely.
Ryan, legend, great having you on board as usual.
Pleasure.
It's been really valuable in terms of an insight for the trends. None of us really know exactly what's going to happen, but what we certainly do know is that there's plenty of opportunity out there. And if anyone wants more guidance and help on helping them grow their business and understanding what data means, using systems like ours that Ryan works with every day of the week, out there, understanding the data, what's behind it. Ryan will be a fantastic addition to your services, because he's got a lot of good insight and he'll make that data work. And one really important thing, Ryan, if people want to get in contact with you, what's the best way to contact you?
Well, there's a number of ways. If you follow me on LinkedIn, I'm very prolific on there. So just search me on LinkedIn, really easy to find. Website is blackraccoon.org. Or find me on Facebook, Instagram. So I'm pretty much everywhere, but LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to find me, find out what I do, find out the projects. So yeah, that's the best place. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks. Absolutely. Thanks so much. And thanks so much for your time again, Ryan. Brilliant. And I guess a happy new year early on, right?
Absolutely. Happy New Year, and let's have a big one.
Fantastic. Thank you much. Thanks for listening. We really want to help as many business owners in the fitness industry as we can. So if you know someone who could also benefit from listening to our episodes, remember to share it with them. That's really important. And if you're enjoying conversations with ClubRight, don't forget to leave us a 5-star review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Really looking forward to seeing you next time.